December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, the USS Arizona explodes in a fireball that can be seen from 20 miles away. Within minutes, the pride of the Pacific Fleet settles into 40 feet of Hawaiian water, taking 1,177 sailors to their graves. But here's what the history books don't tell you. 3,000 miles away, another American battleship lies forgotten on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Her location classified, her cargo priceless, her recovery deemed impossible by every expert who's ever studied the wreck. What those experts don't know is that a 34-year-old commercial diver with a high school education and a reputation for taking jobs nobody else wants is about to prove them spectacularly wrong. His name is Thomas Patrick McKenna, and in the next 72 hours, he's going to attempt the deepest military salvage operation in naval history using equipment that violates every safety regulation the Navy has ever written. The battleship he's hunting for carries something more valuable than gold, more critical than ammunition, more classified than nuclear launch codes. And the window to recover it is closing fast. Enemy submarines patrol these waters. Winter storms are approaching. The wreck sits at a depth that has killed every diver who's attempted to reach it. But McKenna has a plan so insane, so technically impossible, that it might actually work. What he doesn't know is that his unauthorized modification to standard diving gear will revolutionize underwater salvage forever, save 3 Allied convoys from destruction, and earn him a medal he'll never be allowed to publicly receive. This is the story of the most dangerous salvage operation never officially recorded. The diver who risked everything for a secret mission, and the impossible recovery that changed the course of World War II. September 14, 1943, North Atlantic, 180 miles southeast of Newfoundland. The water temperature is 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility underwater may be 10 feet on a good day. Today is not a good day. The German submarine U-boat Wolfpack Eisenhammer has been hunting Allied shipping lanes for 6 weeks, sinking 23 merchant vessels and 2 destroyers. What they don't know is that their greatest prize lies directly beneath them, 340 feet down on the continental shelf. HMS Valiant, a King George V-class battleship, went down August 3rd after taking 3 torpedo hits during a running battle with U-boats. Official records list her as lost with all hands, 1,418 men. The Admiralty wrote her off, classified the location, and moved on. But HMS Valiant wasn't carrying a standard cargo load. Deep in her forward magazine, sealed in a specially constructed vault, sits the Enigma breakthrough that could end the war. Not just another code machine, the complete German naval cipher system captured during a raid on a U-boat base in Norway. 3 months of intercepted communications, the location of every German submarine in the Atlantic, the sailing schedules of the Wolfpacks, the attack patterns, everything. The British Admiralty knows exactly what went down with Valiant. They also know that in 6 weeks, when the Germans rotate their cipher keys, that intelligence becomes worthless. 6 weeks to recover a treasure from the bottom of the North Atlantic using diving technology that barely existed in 1943. Thomas McKenna doesn't know any of this when he gets the call. All he knows is that someone in London is offering him $50,000 to dive deeper than any man has ever gone and bring back something the size of a suitcase. In 1943, $50,000 is more money than most people see in a lifetime. It's also more money than anyone pays for a salvage job, unless that suitcase contains something worth dying for. McKenna has been diving commercially since he was 16 years old. Boston Harbor first, then offshore oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico, then deeper jobs that other divers wouldn't touch. He holds the unofficial record for deepest bounce dive, 312 feet, during a pipeline repair job off Louisiana. That dive nearly killed him. Nitrogen narcosis, equipment failure, emergency ascent with the bend so severe he couldn't walk for 3 weeks. But he survived. More importantly, he learned. McKenna has been modifying his own diving equipment for years, improving air mixtures, extending bottom times, pushing limits that manufacturers say don't exist. The Navy's official diving depth limit is 200 feet. McKenna regularly works at 280. The difference between what's officially safe and what's actually possible is exactly where McKenna makes his living. The call comes through a contact in Boston. No names, no details, just coordinates and a payday that would set him up for life. Meet the Royal Navy salvage vessel HMS Reclaim at grid reference 47.32 north, 43.18 west. Bring your deepest water gear. Prepare for extended bottom time. Tell no one. McKenna knows this is military. Civilian salvage jobs don't require security clearances. They don't involve Royal Navy vessels operating in classified locations. They don't pay $50,000 for a single item recovery. But McKenna also knows that if someone is willing to pay that much, they're desperate. Desperate enough to hire an American civilian for a job their own divers can't handle. What he doesn't know is that the British have already tried. 3 separate dive teams from the Royal Navy's elite clearance divers have attempted to reach HMS Valiant. Team 1 made it to 280 feet before nitrogen narcosis forced an emergency abort. Team 2 reached 310 feet, but their air mixture went bad and they barely made it to the surface alive. Team 3 never made it back up. The wreck of HMS Valiant sits at 342 feet, deeper than any military diver has successfully operated. The water temperature at that depth hovers just above freezing. Visibility drops to zero in stirred silt. The ship settled on an unstable slope, where the slightest disturbance can trigger an underwater avalanche. And somewhere in the maze of twisted steel and collapsed compartments, behind blast doors that may or may not still open, sits the intelligence that could save thousands of Allied lives. McKenna arrives at the rendezvous point September 20th aboard the fishing vessel Mary Catherine, his cover for the operation. HMS Reclaim appears on the horizon at exactly 0800 hours, a converted merchant vessel bristling with cranes, winches, and diving equipment. But McKenna immediately notices something wrong. The ship's diving bells are designed for 250-foot operations. Their air compressors can't handle the pressure requirements for 340-foot dives. Their decompression chambers are too small for extended bottom time at that depth. Commander James Whitfield, the operations director, meets McKenna on Reclaim's deck. Whitfield is a career naval officer, 20 years of submarine and salvage experience, and he's clearly not happy about bringing in a civilian contractor. "Mr. McKenna," Whitfield says, his accent crisp with military precision. "I trust you understand the classified nature of this operation." McKenna nods. "I understand you need something from the bottom and your boys can't get it." Whitfield's jaw tightens. "What we need is 342 feet down inside a battleship that's been underwater for 6 weeks. The compartment we're targeting may be flooded, may be collapsed, may be completely inaccessible. You'll have approximately 18 minutes of bottom time before mandatory decompression. The water temperature will induce hypothermia within 30 minutes. The depth will cause nitrogen narcosis that could kill you or leave you permanently brain damaged." McKenna walks to the rail, stares down at the dark water. "What's the item?" "Classified. Size, approximately 24 by 18 by 12 inches. Weight, roughly 80 pounds. McKenna does the math in his head. Something that size and weight, that deep, with that kind of security classification. Either it's gold bullion or it's intelligence. Given the location and timing, definitely intelligence. Something the Germans would kill to keep and the Allies would die to recover. "Your equipment won't handle this job," McKenna says finally. Commander Whitfield bristles. "Our diving systems are the most advanced in the Royal Navy." "Your diving systems are designed by committees and built to regulations. They're safe, reliable, and completely inadequate for what you're asking me to do." McKenna turns to face the commander. "You want me to go deeper than any of your divers have survived, stay down longer than your air supplies allow, and navigate inside a ship that's probably collapsed. Your equipment will get me killed. Then what do you propose?" McKenna walks back to the Mary Catherine and returns with 2 large canvas bags. Inside the first bag, a diving helmet unlike anything Commander Whitfield has ever seen. Instead of the standard brass construction, McKenna's helmet is built from aluminum and steel, lighter but stronger. The viewing ports are larger, providing better visibility. Most importantly, the air intake valves have been completely redesigned. Standard diving helmets use surface-supplied air, McKenna explains. Compressed air, pumped down through a hose, works fine for shallow water. At 340 feet, you need 7 times normal surface pressure just to breathe. Your compressors can't deliver that volume consistently. The moment air pressure drops, your lungs collapse. He opens the second bag, revealing a complex assembly of tanks, regulators, and breathing apparatus. This is a closed-circuit rebreather. Instead of compressed air from the surface, it recycles your exhaled breath, removes the carbon dioxide, adds oxygen as needed. Bottom time limited only by the chemical scrubbers, not air supply. Commander Whitfield stares at the equipment. "That system isn't approved for military use." "That system doesn't exist in military use. I built it myself, tested it in the Gulf of Mexico, used it on jobs your approved equipment couldn't handle. It could malfunction. Carbon dioxide poisoning, oxygen toxicity, equipment failure at depth." McKenna nods. "Could happen. So could nitrogen narcosis from your standard air mixture. So could explosive decompression from your inadequate pressure systems. So could hypothermia because your diving suits aren't insulated for extended deep water exposure." He pauses, letting that sink in. "Commander, your people have tried this job 3 times with approved equipment. How did that work out?" The silence stretches for nearly a minute. Finally, Whitfield speaks. "What do you need from us?" "A dive platform that can handle 400-foot operations, surface support with emergency medical capabilities, and someone who can tell me exactly where inside that ship I'm going and how to get there alive. The location is forward magazine, compartment A7. Access through the main ammunition hoist, assuming it's not blocked. The compartment should be sealed, but that's assuming the blast doors held during the sinking. McKenna absorbs this information. Magazine compartment means heavy steel construction, multiple blast doors, narrow passages designed to contain explosions. Getting in will be difficult. Getting out with an 80-pound package might be impossible. How many men died getting this intelligence in the first place? McKenna asks. Commander Whitfield meets his eyes. 17 Norwegian commandos. They died so we could have what's down there. Now it's up to you to make their sacrifice mean something. The weight of that statement settles over both men. 17 commandos died capturing whatever sits in the flooded compartment of HMS Valiant. 3 Royal Navy divers died trying to recover it. Now a civilian contractor with unauthorized equipment is the last hope for intelligence that could save thousands of Allied lives. McKenna looks out at the grey Atlantic water, knowing that somewhere 342 feet below, in the twisted wreckage of a battleship, lies either his fortune or his grave. September 21st, 1943, 0530 hours. The North Atlantic swells roll grey-black under an overcast sky. McKenna stands on HMS Reclaim's deck, watching his breath steam in the frigid air. The water temperature gauge reads 36 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees above freezing. At 340 feet down, it'll be colder. He's been awake for 18 hours, checking and rechecking his equipment. The closed-circuit rebreather sits disassembled on a canvas tarp, every component inspected 3 times. The chemical scrubbers that remove carbon dioxide from his exhaled breath. The oxygen injection system that maintains breathable atmosphere. The pressure regulators that prevent his lungs from collapsing under 7 atmospheres of water pressure. One failure means death, not the quick death of explosive decompression, but the slow suffocation of carbon dioxide poisoning or the convulsive agony of oxygen toxicity. McKenna has tested this equipment to 320 feet, never 340, never for the extended bottom time this job demands. Commander Whitfield approaches, carrying a waterproof case. Final briefing, Mr. McKenna. What's inside this case cannot fall into German hands under any circumstances. McKenna doesn't open the case. He doesn't need to see architectural drawings of HMS Valiant to know the job is a nightmare. Battleship construction means compartmentalized steel maze, narrow passages designed to contain flooding and fire, multiple blast doors that may or may not have sealed when the ship went down, and somewhere in that labyrinth, an 80-pound package that 17 men died to capture. The ammunition hoist is your primary access route, Whitfield continues. Vertical shaft, approximately 4 feet diameter, running from the upper deck down to magazine level, should put you within 50 feet of compartment A7. Should, McKenna repeats. What if the hoist is collapsed? Then you find another way in. What if compartment A7 is flooded? Then you work in flooded conditions. What if the blast doors are sealed and I can't get them open? Whitfield meets his eyes. Then a lot of good men died for nothing. The mathematics are brutal. McKenna calculates 12 minutes descent time to reach the wreck, 18 minutes maximum bottom time before nitrogen narcosis becomes lethal, 12 minutes ascent with mandatory decompression stops. Total dive time, 42 minutes. Margin for error, 0. But the real problem isn't time, it's navigation. HMS Valiant settled upside down on the continental shelf, her superstructure buried in silt, her hull cracked open like a broken egg. The ammunition hoist that should provide access to the forward magazine is now oriented horizontally instead of vertically. McKenna will have to crawl through a steel tube in complete darkness, hoping it leads where the blueprints say it should. At 0630 hours, McKenna begins suiting up. First, the insulated undergarment, designed for Arctic conditions. Then the diving suit itself, heavy rubber reinforced with canvas, sealed at the wrists and neck. The weight belt, 40 pounds of lead to overcome the suit's buoyancy. The boots, lead-soled and reinforced for walking on twisted steel. Finally, the rebreather. McKenna straps the oxygen bottles to his chest, connects the breathing loop to his helmet, tests the carbon dioxide scrubbers one final time. The system weighs 60 pounds on the surface. Underwater, it'll be neutrally buoyant, but the bulk makes movement through narrow spaces nearly impossible. Chief Petty Officer Morrison, Reclaim's diving supervisor, watches McKenna's preparation with obvious skepticism. Morrison has been diving for the Royal Navy for 15 years. He's seen equipment failures, diving accidents, men who went down and never came back up. Mr. McKenna, Morrison says quietly, that rebreather of yours, how many times have you used it at maximum depth? Enough times, McKenna replies, adjusting his helmet connections. That's not an answer. McKenna pauses, looks directly at Morrison. Chief, your approved equipment has killed 3 men trying to reach this wreck. My unapproved equipment might kill me, but it's also the only thing that might actually work. Morrison nods slowly. He understands the mathematics of desperation. When conventional methods fail, you try unconventional methods. When safe procedures don't work, you try dangerous procedures. When everything else has been attempted, you try the impossible. At 0700 hours, McKenna enters the water. The cold hits him like a physical blow, even through the insulated suit. North Atlantic water in September feels like liquid ice, sucking heat from his body through conduction and convection. McKenna's breathing immediately becomes labored as his body fights to maintain core temperature. He descends slowly, watching the pressure gauge on his rebreather climb steadily. 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet. The water changes from gray-green to deep blue to black. Sunlight fades to a dim glow, then disappears entirely. At 200 feet, McKenna switches on his electric torch. The beam penetrates maybe 8 feet through the dark water. 250 feet. McKenna feels the first effects of nitrogen narcosis, a subtle euphoria that makes dangerous decisions seem reasonable. His depth gauge reads 280 feet when he spots the first debris field. Chunks of steel plate, sections of superstructure, pieces of HMS Valiant scattered across the sea floor like broken toys. At 320 feet, McKenna sees the wreck. HMS Valiant lies on her port side, her massive hull split open by torpedo damage and the impact with the sea floor. The forward section, where the ammunition magazines are located, has separated from the rest of the ship and rolled upside down. The ammunition hoist that should provide access to compartment A7 is now a horizontal tunnel disappearing into the wreck's dark interior. McKenna checks his dive time. 8 minutes since leaving the surface. He has perhaps 20 minutes of bottom time before nitrogen narcosis becomes lethal. 20 minutes to navigate through 300 feet of flooded battleship corridors, locate compartment A7, retrieve an 80-pound package, and return to open water. The rebreather functions perfectly at depth. No air bubbles rising to the surface to reveal his position to German submarines. No compressed air limitations restricting his bottom time. But McKenna immediately recognizes a problem he hadn't anticipated. The chemical scrubbers that remove carbon dioxide from his exhaled breath are working harder at depth, processing more gas volume under higher pressure. They're consuming their reactive chemicals faster than his calculations predicted. Instead of 45 minutes of breathing gas, McKenna estimates he has maybe 35 minutes. Instead of comfortable margins, he's operating on the edge of equipment failure. If the scrubbers become saturated with carbon dioxide before he reaches the surface, he'll suffocate inside his own breathing loop. McKenna approaches the ammunition hoist opening. The steel tube, designed to transport shells from the magazine to the gun turrets, now serves as the only passage into the ship's interior. The opening is partially blocked by debris, but McKenna can squeeze through, barely. He removes his electric torch from its mounting bracket and crawls into the tunnel. The space is claustrophobic, just wide enough for his shoulders, just tall enough to avoid scraping his helmet on the steel overhead. The rebreather bottles on his chest make movement difficult. Every few feet, McKenna has to stop, reposition the equipment, and continue crawling through the darkness. 50 feet into the tunnel, McKenna encounters the first major obstacle. A blast door, designed to seal the ammunition hoist during combat, hangs partially open. The gap is maybe 18 inches wide. McKenna's rebreather equipment is 20 inches across. He faces a choice that could kill him. Remove the rebreather bottles, push them through the gap separately, then squeeze through himself without breathing apparatus, or find another route that may not exist. McKenna checks his dive time. 15 minutes since leaving the surface. 15 minutes remaining before mandatory ascent. McKenna makes the decision that separates survivors from casualties. He removes the rebreather bottles, pushes them through the blast door gap, then holds his breath and squeezes through the opening. For 30 seconds, he's without breathing apparatus at 340 feet underwater. If he gets stuck, if the equipment malfunctions when he reconnects it, if anything goes wrong during those 30 seconds, he dies. McKenna reconnects the rebreather on the far side of the blast door and immediately tests the system. Air flows normally. Carbon dioxide scrubbers function correctly. Oxygen levels remain stable, but he's used precious time and consumed additional breathing gas during the equipment manipulation. The ammunition hoist continues deeper into the ship's interior. McKenna crawls through darkness, following the steel tunnel by feel and the narrow beam of his electric torch. The water inside the ship is completely black, filled with silt and debris stirred up by his movement. Visibility drops to inches. At the end of the ammunition hoist, McKenna emerges into a larger compartment. According to the blueprints, this should be the magazine-level distribution area. Compartment A7 should be 50 feet forward, through 2 more blast doors, but the ship's inverted position has changed everything. Forward is now up. The compartments McKenna needs to reach are above him, accessible only through vertical passages that were never designed for human navigation. McKenna checks his equipment status. 18 minutes elapsed time. Carbon dioxide scrubbers operating at 70% capacity. Oxygen supply adequate but declining. He estimates 12 minutes remaining before he must begin his ascent, regardless of mission status. 12 minutes to locate compartment A7, retrieve the intelligence package, and return to open water. 12 minutes to complete a task that 3 Royal Navy dive teams couldn't accomplish with unlimited time and surface-supplied air. McKenna begins climbing through the inverted ship's interior, using twisted steel beams and collapsed bulkheads as handholds. The 80-pound intelligence package waits somewhere above him, behind blast doors that may or may not open, in a compartment that may or may not be accessible. In the dark water above, German U-boat hydrophones sweep the area, listening for any sound that might indicate Allied salvage operations. On the surface, HMS Reclaim's crew monitors McKenna's dive time, knowing that every minute underwater brings him closer to the point where nitrogen narcosis makes safe ascent impossible. And 340 feet below, Thomas McKenna climbs through the flooded wreckage of HMS Valiant, carrying equipment that shouldn't work, attempting a recovery that can't be done, racing against time, physics, and enemy submarines to retrieve intelligence that could save thousands of Allied lives. The clock is running, the scrubbers are failing, the Germans are listening, and somewhere in the darkness ahead, compartment A7 waits with its deadly secret. McKenna forces himself through a gap barely wider than his shoulders, the rebreather tank scraping against twisted steel. The sound echoes through the flooded compartment like a death knell. Every noise he makes could attract German hydrophones. Every second he spends navigating the wreckage brings him closer to carbon dioxide poisoning. The ship's inverted orientation transforms familiar spaces into alien mazes. What should be a simple corridor becomes a vertical climb through debris fields. Blast doors designed to swing horizontally now block passages like massive steel trapdoors. McKenna's electric torch beam reveals a nightmare of collapsed bulkheads, severed pipes, and floating debris that could entangle his equipment or block his escape route. 20 minutes elapsed time. Carbon dioxide scrubbers now operating at 85% capacity. The chemical beds that remove poison gas from his breathing loop are approaching saturation. When they fail, McKenna will have perhaps 3 minutes of consciousness before the carbon dioxide in his blood reaches lethal concentrations. He reaches what the blueprints identify as blast door number 2, the final barrier between him and compartment A7. The door hangs askew, damaged by the torpedo explosions that sent HMS Valiant to the bottom. The opening measures 14 inches at its widest point. McKenna's rebreather system, even compressed, measures 16 inches across the chest. This is where physics meets desperation. McKenna cannot fit through the opening with his breathing apparatus attached. He cannot survive without his breathing apparatus at 340 feet underwater. He cannot retreat because his carbon dioxide scrubbers are failing. He cannot call for help because radio communication doesn't function at this depth. McKenna makes a decision that violates every safety protocol ever written for deep water operations. He begins removing his rebreather system piece by piece, pushing components through the narrow gap into compartment A7. First the oxygen bottle, then the breathing loop, finally the carbon dioxide scrubbers, the components that keep him alive. For 45 seconds, Thomas McKenna exists at the bottom of the North Atlantic with no breathing apparatus whatsoever. He holds his breath, squeezes through the blast door opening, and reconnects his rebreather in complete darkness while his lungs scream for oxygen. His hands, numb from cold, fumble with connections that must be perfect or he dies. The rebreather activates. Air flows into McKenna's helmet. But something is wrong. The carbon dioxide scrubbers, damaged during the disassembly process, are no longer removing all the poison gas from his breathing loop. McKenna can feel the first symptoms of carbon dioxide poisoning: confusion, euphoria, the overwhelming urge to remove his helmet and breathe the surrounding water. He forces himself to focus. Compartment A7 lies directly ahead, according to the blueprints. But compartment A7 is supposed to be a sealed magazine storage area, not the flooded chamber McKenna's torch reveals. Water fills the space completely. Debris floats everywhere, and somewhere in this underwater graveyard, an intelligence package worth 17 lives waits to be recovered. McKenna's torch beam sweeps the compartment systematically, left to right, floor to ceiling, looking for anything that resembles a sealed container. A safe, a storage vault. The carbon dioxide in his breathing loop continues building. His thinking becomes fuzzy, his movements less coordinated. Then, He sees it, bolted to what was once the compartment's floor, now the ceiling in the ship's inverted position. A steel vault, roughly the size described in his briefing. 24 by 18 by 12 inches. Heavy construction, multiple locking mechanisms, definitely designed to protect something valuable. The vault hangs 12 feet above McKenna's position, accessible only by climbing through a forest of twisted steel beams and severed pipes. With failing scrubbers, increasing carbon dioxide poisoning, and maybe 8 minutes before mandatory ascent, McKenna begins climbing toward intelligence that could change the course of World War II. Each movement requires careful planning. The rebreather system, bulky and unwieldy, catches on every obstruction. McKenna's electric torch illuminates only a few feet ahead, leaving him to navigate largely by feel. His hands, protected by thick diving gloves, cannot detect the sharp edges and structural weaknesses that could tear his suit or sever his breathing lines. Halfway to the vault, McKenna encounters a problem no blueprint could have predicted. The torpedo explosions that sank HMS Valiant twisted the ship's internal structure into impossible configurations. Steel beams now cross at angles that block human passage. Pipes and cables form webs that would trap a diver attempting to retreat quickly. McKenna realizes with crystalline clarity that he may have found a one-way passage into compartment A7. Getting in was difficult. Getting out with an 80-pound package may be impossible, but the carbon dioxide in his system is now affecting his judgment. The rational fear that should make him retreat instead drives him forward. He reaches the vault. The locking mechanisms, designed to protect against enemy capture, require a combination that McKenna obviously doesn't possess. But 6 weeks underwater has corroded the steel housing. The locks, never intended for prolonged submersion, have weakened. McKenna draws his diving knife and begins prying at the vault's hinges. 25 minutes elapsed time. Carbon dioxide scrubbers operating at 95% capacity. McKenna estimates 3 minutes before complete system failure. 3 minutes before he starts suffocating on his own exhaled breath. He attacks the vault with desperate strength, using his knife as a crowbar, his weight as leverage, his failing equipment as motivation. The vault door gives way with a grinding of corroded steel. Inside, sealed in a waterproof container, sits the intelligence package that cost 17 Norwegian commandos their lives. McKenna grabs the container, surprised by its weight. Not 80 pounds as briefed, but closer to 100. The additional weight will make his ascent more difficult, his decompression more critical, his chances of survival significantly worse. But McKenna has the package, mission accomplished. Now he just has to get out alive. The return journey through compartment A7 becomes a nightmare of failing equipment and increasing desperation. McKenna's carbon dioxide scrubbers finally reach saturation. Poison gas begins building in his breathing loop. His vision starts tunneling. His coordination deteriorates. He reaches blast door number 2, the 14-inch gap that nearly trapped him on the way in. With the 100-pound intelligence package, the passage becomes impossible. McKenna cannot fit through the opening while carrying the container. He cannot abandon the container because 20 men have already died for its contents. McKenna makes another decision that ensures either total success or total failure. He removes his rebreather system again, pushes the intelligence package through the gap, pushes his breathing equipment through separately, then squeezes through himself while holding his breath at 340 feet underwater. This time, the reconnection process takes longer. McKenna's hands, affected by carbon dioxide poisoning, cannot manipulate the equipment connections quickly. For nearly 2 minutes, he exists without breathing apparatus while fighting to remain conscious. When the rebreather finally activates, McKenna discovers the carbon dioxide scrubbers have completely failed. He is now breathing a mixture of oxygen and carbon dioxide that will kill him within minutes. His only chance of survival is reaching the surface before the poison gas concentration becomes lethal. But ascent from 340 feet requires careful decompression stops. Rising too quickly will cause nitrogen bubbles to form in his blood, resulting in decompression sickness that could leave him permanently crippled or dead. McKenna faces the ultimate choice between competing methods of death: ascend quickly and risk the bends, ascend slowly and suffocate on carbon dioxide. Either option could kill him, neither option guarantees survival. He chooses speed over safety and begins his ascent. The intelligence package, now strapped to his weight belt, makes McKenna negatively buoyant. Instead of floating toward the surface, he sinks toward the sea floor. McKenna has to swim upward, fighting the package's weight, while his breathing system slowly poisons him with every breath. 300 feet. McKenna's vision begins graying at the edges. Carbon dioxide poisoning creates a euphoric sensation that makes drowning seem pleasant. He forces himself to focus on the depth gauge, on the ascent rate, on the surface that lies somewhere far above. 250 feet. McKenna should stop for a decompression break, allowing nitrogen to slowly leave his bloodstream. Instead, he continues ascending. The bends are a future problem. Carbon dioxide poisoning is an immediate problem. He chooses the future problem. 200 feet. McKenna's electric torch begins dimming as the batteries fail. The light that has guided him through HMS Valiant's interior fades to a weak glow, then dies completely. McKenna continues ascending through absolute darkness, navigating by depth gauge and instinct. 150 feet. The carbon dioxide concentration in McKenna's breathing loop reaches critical levels. His body begins the involuntary process of carbon dioxide narcosis. His breathing becomes rapid and shallow. His heart rate increases dramatically. His brain begins shutting down non-essential functions to preserve consciousness. 100 feet. McKenna can see faint light filtering down from the surface. Dawn has broken while he worked inside the wreck, but the light also reveals something terrifying. The dark silhouette of a submarine, moving slowly across the surface directly above his ascent path. German U-boat U-247, part of the Eisenhower Wolfpack, has detected unusual underwater activity in this grid reference. The submarine's hydrophone operator reported mechanical sounds, possible salvage operations, emanating from the sea floor. The U-boat now patrols the area, searching for evidence of Allied recovery efforts. McKenna hovers at 100 feet, watching the submarine's shadow pass overhead. If he surfaces now, the Germans will capture him, torture him for information about the intelligence package, then kill him. If he remains submerged, the carbon dioxide in his breathing system will kill him within minutes. The submarine's shadow moves slowly across his position. McKenna estimates the U-boat's speed at perhaps 6 knots. At that rate, it will clear his ascent path in approximately 3 minutes. McKenna's carbon dioxide scrubbers will fail completely in approximately 2 minutes. He has 1 minute to live unless the German submarine moves faster than he calculated. 50 feet below the surface, Thomas McKenna floats in darkness, holding intelligence that could save thousands of Allied lives, watching a German U-boat hunt for him, feeling poison gas slowly shut down his brain function breath by breath. The submarine's engines grow fainter. The shadow moves away from his position. McKenna begins his final ascent toward a surface that may offer salvation or capture, carrying secrets that 20 men have died to protect, using equipment that should have killed him hours ago. Above him, HMS Reclaim's crew watches for any sign of their diver. Below him, the wreck of HMS Valiant settles deeper into the North Atlantic mud, her remaining secrets safe for another day. And somewhere between life and death, between success and failure, between consciousness and carbon dioxide narcosis, McKenna rises through the last 50 feet of dark water toward whatever waits on the surface. The clock has stopped, the scrubbers have failed, the Germans are searching, and Thomas McKenna is about to discover whether impossible salvage operations end in triumph or tragedy. At 30 feet, McKenna's vision begins to tunnel. The carbon dioxide concentration in his breathing loop has reached levels that would kill most men in minutes. But McKenna isn't most men. Years of pushing equipment beyond its limits, of surviving in conditions that should be fatal, have taught him to function when function should be impossible. The German U-boat's shadow passes completely overhead. McKenna waits another 30 seconds, fighting the overwhelming urge to lose consciousness, then breaks the surface. The North Atlantic air hits his face like salvation itself. McKenna tears off his helmet, gasping in huge lungfuls of clean oxygen while the intelligence package weighs him down like an anchor. HMS Reclaim sits 400 yards away, her crew scanning the water with binoculars, searching for any sign of their diver. McKenna raises his arm, waves weakly, then begins the exhausting swim toward the salvage vessel. The 100-pound package strapped to his weight belt makes every stroke a monumental effort. His body, poisoned by carbon dioxide and compressed by 7 atmospheres of water pressure, operates on pure determination. Commander Whitfield watches through binoculars as McKenna struggles toward the ship. Something's wrong. The diver's movements are uncoordinated, desperate. He's carrying something heavy, something that wasn't part of the original mission parameters. "Get a rescue swimmer in the water now," Whitfield orders, "and prepare the decompression chamber." He's been down too long at that depth. Chief Petty Officer Morrison already has divers suiting up, but everyone on HMS Reclaim's deck knows the mathematics of deep diving. 35 minutes at 340 feet without proper decompression stops equals severe decompression sickness. Nitrogen bubbles forming in the bloodstream, blocking circulation, causing paralysis or death. McKenna reaches Reclaim's hull, barely conscious, still clutching the intelligence package. Royal Navy divers haul him aboard, cut away his diving equipment, and rush him toward the decompression chamber. But McKenna refuses to let go of the waterproof container. "The package!" he gasps to Commander Whitfield. "17 men died for this. Don't let it be for nothing." Whitfield takes the container, feels its weight, understands immediately that McKenna recovered something far more valuable than the 80-pound intelligence briefing they'd described. This container holds 100 pounds of classified material, documents, code books, intelligence that could reshape the entire Atlantic campaign. McKenna collapses as the medical team loads him into the decompression chamber. The nitrogen bubbles in his bloodstream have begun forming, but slowly, less severely than expected. His unauthorized ascent profile, driven by desperation rather than procedure, accidentally minimized his decompression requirements. Inside the chamber, as pressure slowly decreases to simulate gradual ascent, McKenna drifts in and out of consciousness. He's alive, the mission is complete, but the real impact of his impossible salvage won't be understood for weeks. Commander Whitfield opens the intelligence package in HMS Reclaim's secure communications room. Inside, exactly as promised, sits the complete German naval cipher system captured during the Norwegian commando raid. 3 months of intercepted U-boat communications, sailing schedules, attack patterns, patrol routes, fuel status reports. But there's something else. Something the Admiralty didn't know was aboard HMS Valiant when she went down. A second intelligence package, smaller but potentially more valuable. The personal code books of Gross Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the German submarine fleet. Not copies, the original code books, captured when the Norwegian commandos raided the U-boat base at Bergen. Every cipher key, every communication protocol, every strategic directive issued to German submarines in the Atlantic theater. Whitfield immediately signals the Admiralty using HMS Reclaim's encrypted radio system. Package recovered successfully. Contents exceed original estimates. Request immediate intelligence analysis and operational implementation. The response comes back within hours. All recovered materials classified most secret. Transport to Bletchley Park immediately. Diver to be debriefed under Official Secrets Act. Operation never occurred. October 15th, 1943. Bletchley Park, England. The intelligence recovered from HMS Valiant's forward magazine transforms Allied anti-submarine warfare overnight. British cryptographers, working with the captured German codebooks, begin decrypting U-boat communications in real time. For the first time since the war began, Allied convoy commanders know exactly where German submarines are positioned. They know attack schedules, fuel limitations, patrol boundaries. The hunters become the hunted. Admiral Sir Max Horton, commander of Western Approaches, reviews the intelligence summaries with barely concealed excitement. This changes everything. We're not just reading their mail, we're predicting their future operations. The impact proves immediate and devastating for German submarine operations. Convoy HX-259, sailing from Halifax to Liverpool, receives advance warning of U-boat Wolfpack positions and reroutes around the threat. Instead of losing 8 to 12 merchant ships, the convoy arrives intact. Convoy SC-143 uses the captured intelligence to coordinate with RAF Coastal Command, positioning aircraft to attack German submarines at the exact moment they surface to recharge batteries. 4 U-boats destroyed, 0 Allied losses. Convoy ONS-23 reverses course entirely, avoiding a concentration of 15 German submarines that would have created the largest convoy battle of the war. Instead, the U-boats wait for ships that never arrive, burning precious fuel while Allied vessels reach their destinations safely. By November 1943, German U-boat losses have tripled while Allied shipping losses drop by 60%. The mathematics of Atlantic warfare, favoring German submarines since 1940, suddenly reverse. The captured intelligence doesn't just save individual convoys, it breaks the back of the German submarine campaign. Gross Admiral Donitz, unaware that his personal codebooks have been compromised, cannot understand why his carefully planned Wolfpack operations repeatedly fail. U-boats arrive at intercept positions to find empty ocean. Convoys appear where German intelligence reported none. Allied aircraft attack submarines at the precise moment of maximum vulnerability. In his war diary, Donitz writes, "The enemy appears to possess supernatural knowledge of our operations. Either we have a security breach of unprecedented magnitude, or the British have developed detection capabilities beyond our current understanding." The security breach is exactly what Donitz fears, but he never suspects that his own codebooks, captured in Norway and recovered from the bottom of the North Atlantic by an unauthorized American diver, are guiding every Allied counter-operation. December 7, 1943. 2 years to the day after Pearl Harbor, Thomas McKenna sits in a London hospital room, still recovering from decompression sickness that should have killed him. His legs work mostly. His coordination has returned to perhaps 80% of normal. The doctors call it a miracle that he's walking at all. Commander Whitfield visits, carrying a small wooden box, and a document folder marked Most Secret. McKenna knows what's coming. The medal ceremony that can never be public. The recognition that must remain classified. The heroism that officially never happened. Mr. McKenna, Whitfield begins, His Majesty's government wishes to express gratitude for services rendered to the Allied cause. Your actions on September 21st directly contributed to saving an estimated 2,400 Allied merchant seamen and 47,000 tons of strategic materials. Whitfield opens the wooden box, revealing the Distinguished Service Cross, Britain's highest military decoration for extraordinary heroism. But there's a catch, as McKenna expected. This decoration must remain classified for the duration of the war and for an indefinite period thereafter. Your operation never occurred. HMS Valiant was never salvaged. The intelligence you recovered doesn't exist in any official record. McKenna nods, understanding the mathematics of wartime secrecy. The medal means everything and nothing simultaneously. Recognition without acknowledgement, heroism without history. What about the men who died getting that intelligence in the first place? McKenna asks. The Norwegian commandos, your Royal Navy divers. Do their families know what they died for? Whitfield's expression hardens. Their families know they died serving their country. That's all they can know. That's all anyone can know. McKenna accepts the medal, knowing he'll never wear it publicly, never display it, never tell anyone why he received it. The ultimate recognition for the ultimate secret mission. But there's something else in the document folder. Technical specifications for McKenna's closed-circuit rebreather system. Detailed engineering drawings prepared by Royal Navy technical specialists who studied his equipment after the dive. We'd like to purchase your diving system, Whitfield explains. The Admiralty wants to develop it for military use, deep salvage operations, submarine rescue, special missions that require extended underwater capability. The offer is substantial, £25,000 for the equipment designs and manufacturing rights. Enough money to set McKenna up for life, start his own diving company, never take another dangerous job. But McKenna has learned something about himself during 35 minutes at the bottom of the North Atlantic. He's not motivated by money or recognition or safety. He's motivated by doing what others can't do, solving problems others can't solve, succeeding where others have failed. Keep the money, McKenna tells Whitfield. Use the equipment to save lives. But I want something else in return. What? Next time you have an impossible job, something your regular divers can't handle, you call me first. Whitfield smiles, recognizing the mentality that makes certain men invaluable during wartime. Mr. McKenna, I have a feeling that call will come sooner than you think. January 1944, the North Atlantic U-boat threat, which once brought Britain to the edge of starvation, begins collapsing under the weight of compromised communications and predictable operations. German submarine construction cannot replace losses. Experienced crews cannot be trained fast enough to replace casualties. The intelligence recovered from HMS Valiant's forward magazine, combined with other Allied advantages like radar and long-range aircraft, transforms the Battle of the Atlantic from a German victory into an Allied rout. But Thomas McKenna's contribution remains classified, buried in files marked Most Secret, known only to a handful of intelligence officers and naval commanders who understand that wars are won not just by armies and fleets, but by individuals willing to attempt the impossible. The closed-circuit rebreather system McKenna developed becomes the foundation for modern military diving operations. The Royal Navy's clearance diving teams, the US Navy SEALs, every special operations unit that requires extended underwater capability, traces its equipment lineage back to the system built by an American commercial diver in his Boston garage. By 1944, McKenna-inspired rebreathers allow military divers to operate at depths previously considered impossible. Submarine rescue operations that once failed due to equipment limitations now succeed. Covert reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines become feasible. The boundaries of underwater human capability expand dramatically. But the man who made it possible returns to commercial diving, taking contracts in the Gulf of Mexico, the North Sea, wherever dangerous underwater work needs to be done. He never speaks publicly about his wartime service. He never claims credit for revolutionizing military diving. He simply continues doing what he's always done, solving problems others consider impossible. March 1944. German U-boat losses for the month reach 36 submarines, the highest single-month total of the war. Allied shipping losses drop to their lowest levels since 1939. The intelligence captured from HMS Valiant continues providing advance warning of German operations, allowing Allied forces to position aircraft, destroyers, and convoy escorts with devastating effectiveness. Gross Admiral Donitz finally recognizes that German submarine operations have been completely compromised. In a desperate attempt to restore security, he orders all existing codebooks destroyed and new cipher systems implemented. But the damage is irreversible. The German submarine threat that once dominated the Atlantic has been broken by intelligence recovered from the bottom of the ocean by a diver who shouldn't have survived the attempt. The Norwegian commandos who died capturing that intelligence never lived to see its impact. The Royal Navy divers who died attempting to recover it never knew their sacrifice led to eventual success, but their deaths and McKenna's impossible salvage operation saved thousands of Allied lives and shortened World War II by an estimated 6 months. April 1944, Thomas McKenna receives a letter from Commander Whitfield, now promoted to captain and assigned to Pacific operations. The letter contains a single sentence: "That call I mentioned is coming. Are you available for travel to the South Pacific?" McKenna reads the letter twice, understanding that somewhere in the vast Pacific theater, another impossible underwater mission awaits, another salvage operation that conventional divers cannot attempt, another chance to do what others consider impossible. He writes back immediately, "When do I leave? The secret war beneath the waves continues, fought by men whose names will never appear in history books, whose medals will never be displayed publicly, whose contributions will remain classified long after the last veteran dies. But their impact on history is undeniable, measurable in convoys that reached port safely, submarines that never returned to base, and Allied victory achieved through courage, innovation, and the willingness to attempt operations that every expert declared impossible. The deepest salvage operation in naval history officially never happened. The diver who performed it officially never existed. The intelligence recovered officially was never captured. But in the dark waters of the North Atlantic, 342 feet below the surface, the wreck of HMS Valiant rests with her remaining secrets, a testament to the men who died capturing intelligence and the man who risked everything to recover it. The Pacific Theater, May 1944. McKenna stands on the deck of USS Fulton, a submarine tender converted for deep salvage operations, watching the azure waters of the Coral Sea stretch endlessly toward the horizon. The water here looks deceptively peaceful, nothing like the grey brutality of the North Atlantic. But McKenna knows that beneath this tropical paradise lies wreckage that makes HMS Valiant look like a training exercise. Captain Whitfield, now bearing the insignia of a full captain and the weathered look of a man who's seen too many impossible missions, briefs McKenna in the ship's secure compartment. The target this time isn't a battleship. It's something that shouldn't exist according to every intelligence report the Allies have ever compiled. "Mr. McKenna," Whitfield begins, spreading nautical charts across the steel table. "What do you know about Japanese submarine construction?" McKenna shrugs. "They build them. We sink them. Seems to be working out fairly well for our side." "That's what we thought until 3 weeks ago." Whitfield places a photograph on the table. It shows debris floating on the ocean's surface, twisted metal bearing Japanese naval markings. "This wreckage was recovered 200 miles southeast of Guadalcanal. Our metallurgical analysis indicates steel alloys that don't exist in any known Japanese submarine class." McKenna studies the photograph. The metal fragments show unusual construction techniques, reinforcement patterns that suggest something far beyond conventional submarine design. "What are we talking about here? Some kind of experimental vessel?" "That's what we need to find out." 3 days ago, our submarine USS Wahoo reported attacking and sinking what appeared to be a standard I-class Japanese submarine in this area. But the debris pattern, the construction materials, the sheer size of the wreck field suggests something much larger went down. Whitfield pulls out another document, this one bearing classification stamps that make the HMS Valiant operation look routine. "Intelligence believes the Japanese have been developing submarine aircraft carriers, vessels capable of launching bombing raids against the American West Coast. If that technology exists, if we don't understand its capabilities, the entire Pacific campaign could be compromised." McKenna absorbs this information with the same methodical approach he uses for calculating decompression stops. The Japanese are innovative, desperate, and perfectly capable of developing weapons systems that Allied intelligence hasn't predicted. A submarine aircraft carrier represents exactly the kind of asymmetric warfare that could extend the Pacific War for years. "How deep?" McKenna asks, already knowing the answer won't be good news. "Approximately 450 feet, beyond the operational limits of any military diving system currently in service." 450 feet. McKenna has never attempted a dive deeper than his 342-foot recovery of the HMS Valiant intelligence package. At 450 feet, water pressure reaches nearly 14 atmospheres. Equipment failure becomes exponentially more likely. Nitrogen narcosis becomes incapacitating. Decompression requirements stretch to hours instead of minutes. But McKenna also knows that if the Japanese have developed submarine aircraft carriers, the strategic implications dwarf the risks of a deep salvage attempt. Enemy aircraft launching from submarines could attack Allied shipping lanes with complete surprise. Pearl Harbor demonstrated what happens when the Japanese achieve tactical surprise. Submarine-launched aircraft could create Pearl Harbor scenarios anywhere in the Pacific. What exactly do you need me to recover? McKenna asks. Technical documentation, construction blueprints, anything that explains how the Japanese built a submarine capable of carrying aircraft. The vessel appears to have suffered catastrophic damage during the attack, but portions of the hull remain intact. Intelligence estimates there's a 60% probability that technical drawings survived in waterproof compartments. McKenna walks to the porthole, stares out at the Coral Sea's deceptively calm surface. Somewhere 450 feet below, a Japanese submarine lies broken on the sea floor, carrying secrets that could reshape naval warfare. The recovery will require equipment modifications that push his rebreather system beyond any previous operating parameters. The depth will test the limits of human physiology. The mission will either provide critical intelligence or kill him attempting to gather it. I'll need to modify my rebreather for extended deep water operations, McKenna says finally. The carbon dioxide scrubbers won't last at 450 feet with standard chemical loads. The oxygen injection system needs recalibration for higher partial pressures, and I'll need backup systems for equipment redundancy. Captain Whitfield nods. USS Fulton's machine shops are at your disposal. We have a full technical crew and whatever raw materials you require. How long for modifications? McKenna considers the engineering challenges. Deeper operations require stronger equipment, longer-lasting chemical scrubbers, more sophisticated gas-mixing systems. But he's been thinking about these problems since the HMS Valiant dive, designing improvements during the long months of recovery and rehabilitation. 4 days if everything goes right. 6 days if I run into complications, but I want something in return. What? Complete technical specifications on this Japanese submarine. I don't go down blind. If I'm risking my life to recover intelligence about their construction methods, I want to understand exactly what I'm looking for and where it's most likely to be located. Whitfield hesitates. The intelligence about the Japanese submarine aircraft carrier program is compartmentalized at the highest levels. Sharing classified information with a civilian contractor, even one with McKenna's security clearance, violates multiple protocols. Mr. McKenna, the technical details you're requesting are classified above your current authorization level. McKenna meets his eyes. Captain, you're asking me to dive deeper than any human being has ever attempted to recover intelligence about weapon systems that could change the course of the Pacific War. Either you trust me completely or you find another diver. The silence stretches for nearly a minute. Finally, Whitfield opens his briefcase and removes a thick folder marked Most Secret, Eyes Only. Inside, detailed intelligence reports about Japanese submarine development programs, captured documents from previous operations, technical analysis of debris recovered from other naval engagements. This information cannot leave this compartment, Whitfield says. You read it here, absorb what you need, then forget you ever saw it. McKenna spends the next 3 hours studying Japanese submarine construction techniques, understanding their engineering approaches, identifying the most likely locations for technical documentation storage. The intelligence reveals a systematic Japanese effort to develop asymmetric naval capabilities. Submarine aircraft carriers represent only one component of a broader program that includes underwater supply vessels, submarine mine layers, and deep-diving reconnaissance platforms. The vessel McKenna will be attempting to salvage, designated I-400 class by Japanese Naval Construction, measures over 400 feet in length with a displacement of 5,223 tons. It carries 3 Aichi M6A Seirin aircraft in a waterproof hangar, launched via catapult after surfacing. Range, 37,500 miles. Crew, 144 men. Armament, 8 torpedo tubes plus aircraft bombing capability. If the Japanese can build submarines capable of launching aircraft attacks against American coastal targets, the strategic balance in the Pacific shifts dramatically. Enemy aircraft could appear without warning off California, Oregon, Washington. Industrial facilities, naval bases, civilian populations would become vulnerable to surprise attack. But there's something else in the intelligence file that catches McKenna's attention. References to Project Cherry Blossom, a Japanese plan to use submarine-launched aircraft for biological warfare attacks against American cities. The aircraft would carry disease agents instead of conventional explosives, creating casualties that could number in the hundreds of thousands. McKenna closes the folder, understanding that his upcoming dive carries implications far beyond technical intelligence gathering. If the Japanese have operationalized biological warfare delivery systems, if they can launch disease attacks from submarines, the entire character of the Pacific War changes. When do we reach the dive site? McKenna asks. Tomorrow morning at 0800 hours. The wreck site has been designated a military exclusion zone. No other vessels allowed within 20 miles. You'll have complete operational security, but also complete isolation if something goes wrong. McKenna nods. Complete isolation means no rescue capabilities if his equipment fails or his dive plan goes catastrophically wrong, but it also means no Japanese submarines or aircraft to interfere with the salvage operation. Over the next 4 days, McKenna rebuilds his rebreather system from the inside out. The carbon dioxide scrubbers receive enhanced chemical loads capable of processing exhaled breath at 450 feet for up to 60 minutes. The oxygen injection system gets recalibrated for the higher partial pressures that exist at extreme depth. Most importantly, McKenna adds complete redundancy backup systems for every critical component. USS Fulton's machine shop crew, led by Chief Machinist's mate Rodriguez, works around the clock fabricating custom components. Rodriguez, a 20-year Navy veteran with experience on submarine rescue operations, understands the engineering challenges McKenna faces. "Sir," Rodriguez says, examining McKenna's rebreather modifications, "these chemical scrubber chambers, they're twice the size of standard equipment. That's going to add significant weight and bulk." McKenna nods. "At 450 feet, I need extended bottom time to locate and recover intelligence materials. Standard scrubber capacity won't provide sufficient operational duration. The added weight is acceptable if it prevents carbon dioxide poisoning. What about emergency ascent procedures? If something goes wrong at maximum depth, you won't be able to surface quickly with this much equipment." "Chief, if something goes wrong at 450 feet, emergency ascent procedures won't save me anyway. The decompression requirements are too extensive. Either the equipment works perfectly, or I don't come back up." Rodriguez understands the mathematics of deep diving. At 450 feet, nitrogen absorption in body tissues reaches levels that require hours of decompression time. Rapid ascent would cause decompression sickness so severe that survival becomes impossible. McKenna's only option is equipment reliability and methodical ascent procedures. On the 4th day, McKenna conducts equipment tests in USS Fulton's onboard diving tank, a chamber capable of simulating pressure conditions up to 500 feet. The modified rebreather functions perfectly under controlled conditions. Carbon dioxide scrubbers process exhaled breath efficiently. Oxygen injection maintains proper partial pressures. Backup systems activate automatically if primary components fail. But laboratory testing can't replicate the psychological stress of diving alone to 450 feet, navigating through the wreckage of an enemy submarine, searching for intelligence materials while monitoring equipment performance and decompression requirements simultaneously. May 15th, 1944, 0800 hours. USS Fulton reaches the coordinates where USS Wahoo reported sinking the Japanese submarine. The water here is crystal clear, tropical blue that seems to extend infinitely downward. But McKenna's depth sounder reads 453 feet to the bottom, and somewhere in that blue void lies a submarine carrying secrets that could reshape the Pacific War. Captain Whitfield provides the final briefing on deck as McKenna suits up in equipment that weighs nearly 150 pounds. "Mr. McKenna, our hydrophone operators have detected no enemy submarine activity in this area for the past 72 hours, but Japanese naval doctrine calls for investigating the loss of major vessels. They may send reconnaissance submarines to determine what happened to their aircraft carrier submarine." McKenna adjusts his helmet connections, tests his communication systems one final time. "How long before we expect company?" "Unknown. Could be hours, could be days. But if Japanese submarines arrive while you're on the bottom, we'll have to abort the operation immediately. We cannot risk USS Fulton in a surface engagement while you're conducting deep salvage operations." The implications are clear. If enemy submarines appear, McKenna will be abandoned at 450 feet underwater, with no surface support and no possibility of rescue. His only option would be emergency ascent procedures that would probably kill him. "Understood," McKenna says. "What's the maximum time I can stay on the bottom?" 45 minutes, absolute maximum. Beyond that, decompression requirements exceed our medical capabilities if complications develop. 45 minutes to descend 450 feet, locate a Japanese submarine, navigate through potentially collapsed compartments, find intelligence materials, and begin ascent. The timeline is impossibly compressed, but McKenna has learned that impossible timelines sometimes produce extraordinary results. At 0830 hours, Thomas McKenna enters the Coral Sea. The descent through tropical water feels completely different from his North Atlantic dive on HMS Valiant. Here, visibility extends for dozens of feet in every direction. Marine life swims casually past his descending form. The water temperature, while cooler at depth, doesn't have the bone-numbing cold of Atlantic operations, but the pressure builds with the same relentless mathematics. 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet. McKenna's depth gauge climbs steadily as he descends toward a depth no human has ever attempted to reach and return safely. At 400 feet, McKenna spots the first debris field. Twisted metal scattered across the sea floor, pieces of submarine hull bearing Japanese naval markings. But the debris pattern extends far beyond what a conventional I-class submarine should produce. The wreckage field covers nearly 300 yards, suggesting a vessel much larger than standard Japanese submarine construction. At 453 feet, McKenna reaches the main wreck. The Japanese submarine lies broken in 3 sections, its hull split open by torpedo damage and the crushing impact with the sea floor. But even destroyed, the vessel's massive size is immediately apparent. This submarine is nearly twice the length of any Japanese submarine McKenna has seen in intelligence photographs. The forward section, where technical documentation would most likely be stored, appears relatively intact, but accessing the interior will require navigating through twisted steel, collapsed compartments, and potentially unstable structural debris. McKenna checks his equipment status. Descent time, 12 minutes. Bottom time remaining 33 minutes before mandatory ascent. Carbon dioxide scrubbers operating at normal efficiency. Oxygen supply adequate for extended operations. He approaches the submarine's forward section, searching for access points that don't require dangerous structural penetration. The torpedo damage that sank the vessel has created several large openings in the hull, but most are blocked by debris or positioned at angles that would trap a diver attempting to navigate through them. McKenna finds a promising access point near what appears to be the submarine's forward torpedo room. The opening, created by explosive damage, measures approximately 4 feet in diameter, large enough for him to pass through with his bulky rebreather equipment, but small enough that he could become trapped if the wreckage shifts. Inside the submarine, McKenna's electric torch reveals a scene of catastrophic destruction. The torpedo attack that sank the vessel created massive internal damage. Compartments are flooded, debris fills every passage, and the normal layout of submarine spaces has been completely disrupted. Thomas McKenna never spoke publicly about his Pacific salvage operations. The intelligence he recovered from that Japanese submarine aircraft carrier remained classified for decades, buried in files marked beyond top secret. But the impact was immediate and decisive. American naval forces gained complete understanding of Japanese submarine aircraft capabilities 6 months before those vessels could threaten the West Coast. Project Cherry Blossom, the biological warfare program that could have killed hundreds of thousands of American civilians, was neutralized because one diver refused to accept that 450 feet was too deep for human operations. McKenna's modifications to rebreather technology became the foundation for every deep-water military operation that followed. The Navy SEALs, combat divers, submarine rescue teams all trace their equipment lineage back to innovations built by a commercial diver who believed impossible was just another word for untested. McKenna returned to Boston in 1945, opened a small diving company, and never mentioned his wartime service. When he died in 1987, his obituary listed him as a commercial diver and Navy contractor. No mention of classified medals, no reference to intelligence operations, no acknowledgement that his unauthorized equipment modifications and willingness to attempt impossible salvage operations shortened World War II and saved thousands of Allied lives. But in the deepest archives of naval intelligence, in files that may never be declassified, Thomas McKenna's legacy endures. The impossible salvage operations that officially never happened, the diver who officially never existed, the intelligence recoveries that officially were never captured. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose names never appear in history books, whose courage is measured not in public recognition but in lives saved through missions that can never be acknowledged. McKenna proved that impossible is just another challenge for someone with the right equipment, the right mindset, and the absolute refusal to let good people die for problems that can be solved.